Since South Africa took Israel to the International Court of Justice, there are two questions that I keep asking myself. One, what does South Africa stand to gain? Two, what will South Africa lose? To Cyril Ramaphosa, he says, we were taught by Nelson Mandela that our freedom will never be complete until the freedom of the Palestinians is also attained. I have never felt so proud as I felt today. Will Nelson Mandela have taken such an action? Welcome to Mandela Unveiled. The name is Mandela. Cyril Ramaphosa makes us understand that he has never felt so proud like he felt the day the ICJ case started. But the question I ask Cyril Ramaphosa is, would Nelson Mandela, whom he said is their inspiration for pursuing this case, have taken a similar action? The Nelson Mandela we all know is someone who looks to home first, seeks to put his house in order. That is why when he became the president of South Africa, he didn't go after the white South Africans like Robert Mugabe did in Rhodesia. Instead, he decided to bring about reconciliation, to forget about the past and forge forward the future with one vision. I'm saying this and I'm boiling down to one point. Sudan. Sudan is on the African continent. Sudan is in the same situation as Gaza. Sudan is in a war. The only difference between the Sudanese war and that of Palestine is fight between two countries. However, the Sudanese war is an internal one. Nonetheless, Sudan's war has displaced more than 9.6 million people. In fact, there are over 5 million internally displaced people in Sudan. It is the war that has displaced more people than any war. More than 12,000 people have died from the Sudanese war. And there are reports of ethnic cleansing. In fact, a deceased governor in Sudan who claimed genocide attempt, or who was trying to act as a whistleblower on genocide carried out by the RSF, was killed. Would Nelson Mandela have turned his attention to solve situations on the African continent, that is Sudan, or he would have sent a case to the ICJ to fight a Palestinian cause? Indeed, the African leader is hypocritical. In fact, hypocrisy is the commander-in-chief of most African leaders. Dear Cyril Ramaphosa, you said you felt so proud the day you took that case to ICJ and the day the proceedings started. However, Mr. Ramaphosa, since the start of the Sudanese war, you have never traveled to Sudan. Yet, you traveled together with other African leaders to Ukraine and Russia. Aren't Ukraine and Russia also at war? Probably you feared that missiles or stray bullets would hit you in Sudan. Missiles and stray bullets could also hit you in Ukraine or Russia. Yet, you went to act as mediators. On the 4th of January, you received the leader of the RSF in South Africa. You never traveled to Sudan. You didn't go to Sudan to know the situation on the ground. President Ruto received the leaders of Sudan in Nairobi, Kenya. In fact, the IGAD group keep organizing meetings, holding meetings outside Sudan. No African leader has traveled to Sudan to see the situation for themselves. Not even the African Union leaders. So dear South Africa and dear Cyril Ramaphosa, is this Palestinian cause for the sake of humanity, or there is a different purpose? If it is for the sake of humanity, more than 24 million Sudanese children have been displaced, and many more are suffering from hunger, starvation, malnutrition. Most children have missed their vaccines. People who are diabetic do not have access to insulin. In fact, the RSF has taken over the major health infrastructure in the country. Recently, the WHO warned that there could be the release of a potential biohazard because the RSF had taken over one of the laboratories in Sudan. So if it is for the sake of humanity, dear Cyril Ramaphosa, why didn't you divert your attention to Sudan, which is an African country? Sudan is an African country on African continent. There have been numerous marches on the street of South Africa calling for ceasefire in Palestine. I have never seen any march or protest in South Africa calling for ceasefire in Sudan. Dear Cyril Ramaphosa, is there something to gain in this ICJ case? Aside the similarity in your history, is there something different to gain that you have to neglect your own African country, women and children? The Masalit tribe who are undergoing ethnic cleansing, but you decided to turn a blind eye to their plight. You decided to turn a deaf ear to their plight. Instead, you took to the ICJ and you are championing a cause. No one is saying that the situation in Gaza is desirable. No. But why don't we learn to handle our own situations first? Because the start of the Gaza-Israel war meant that the allies of Sudan had to divert all their funds to Israel and Palestine. And this is the time for South Africa to show her might on the continent. I'm so concerned and particular about South Africa because South Africa is a giant on the African continent. In fact, South Africa is the only African country that belongs to the BRICS. That is why South Africa has been able to take this particular case to The Hague, and it carries weight. So, dear South Africa, you are a giant on the African continent, on the world stage. When you speak and when you step into the Sudan situation, those troubled waters will become still. Probably you underestimate your own power and influence. However, you have decided to chart a different path. Nonetheless, you receive the RSF leader. This is a group that metamorphosized from the Janjaweed militia that committed genocide, which Omar al-Bashir was wanted. And you receive such a leader in South Africa. So what message are you sending to the other faction back in Sudan? Dear Cyril Ramaphosa, is this the course of action Nelson Mandela would have taken? Or this is just a time for Ramaphosa to shine in the international stage? This is a time for Ramaphosa to come out as a global icon to some extent? Or is this just some kind of PR gimmick from Mr. Ramaphosa and his group? To the lawyers who said they're not going to wear the colonial wig and all that, and they decide to wear dreadlocks, you should rather use those knowledge and power to fight for the liberation of the Sudanese people. And to my dear friend Julius Malema, you have always preached for a united Africa. You have always preached for the unity of the black people. You have condemned the alleged attack on the hospitals in Gaza. Yet, I did not hear you criticize the takeover of hospitals, medical laboratories, blood banks, etc. in Sudan. I did not hear you call people out on the street of South Africa to demonstrate against the atrocities committed by both factions. Dear South Africa, dear Cyril Ramaphosa, is there something to gain in this ICJ case? Well, at the end of the day, we all know how these cases end. Not long ago, Vladimir Putin had an arrest warrant from the same court. Today, he's still a free man. And South Africa, you know where this case will go. And you know how this case will end, because already people are taking sides and factions. So instead of taking this course, why didn't South Africa think of helping the people of Sudan with your power, with your might, and with your authority? Instead, you have decided to leave the Sudanese people to their fate. The people of Sudan are watching South Africa closely, and they have realized that at the point of need, you have decided to chart a different path for yourself. Sudan is in a volatile area. The only country that Sudanese probably would walk in and have hope is Egypt. However, Egypt has to deal with refugees from Palestine. Sudanese will either have to walk into Chad. Chad is no better. Central African Republic, which is a failed state. Sudanese would have to go into Eritrea and to some extent Ethiopia. So you have left the people of Sudan, especially the Masalit tribe, who are undergoing some form of ethnic cleansing, to die undesirable death. And I would say, dear Cyril Ramaphosa, fighting the African cause should be paramount to you. At this stage, we should be thinking about ending the war in Sudan. Because, dear Cyril Ramaphosa, you know where this ICJ case will go. You know where it will end. But if you put your power and authority in Sudan, you would end the war. A word to the wise, they say, is enough. The name is Mandela on Mandela Unveiled. Make sure to subscribe, like our videos, post and repost, share, and leave us a comment. Tell us what you want us to talk about, and we shall delve deep into that. Adios.